All right. It's been a it's been a long week. I'm pretty tired. I kind of want to just relax and play a video game, but I don't know. I have these pangs where I'm just like, I have anxiety, and I'm just like, I need to read everything that I've never read. Like all of the things, flash before my eyes I haven't read. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do it for the next, month. I'm just gonna read multiple hours every night, just get stuff done. And like I have an intensity to do that. And then the intensity, wears off after a couple of days. And you can't read that much in a couple of days. And then it just comes back a couple of weeks later or something. But anyway, I'm going to try to keep plugging along here on Kant. We are currently at this is page 183 of the Penguin Classics edition that I've been reading. The Transcendental Doctrine of the Power of Judgment, or Analytic of Principles. Power of Judgment. Okay, cool. Chapter 2. System of all principles of the pure understanding. System of all principles of the pure understanding. So I watched Victor Gijsbers. I have kind of I'm getting into kind of a rhythm here where I'll pretty much watch one Victor Gijsbers video per day, typically while I'm putting the baby down. It's usually like a 20 or 30 minutes where I can like put my headphones on and listen to it. And then I come down here and I'm able to just when it's fresh in my mind, read the section I just, listened to the lecture about. And my understanding is like this is going to talk about like the fundamental concepts. I don't remember what fundamental concepts might not be the right. It's definitely not the right term. Oh, maybe it's the next section. The supreme principle of all analytic judgments. And so Kant is going to talk about the supreme principle of all analytic judgments and then all synthetic judgments. And this is like effectively like the bottom line basis for analytic judgments, then a bottom line basis for synthetic judgments. Analytic judgments, it's the principle of non-contradiction. So like no analytic / definitional truth, because it's based on the definition, like the definition or rule or concept that it posits can't contradict itself, and therefore that is kind of the baseline for analytic judgments, or the supreme principle rather. And then for synthetic judgments, effectively it's the transcendental deduction. That's my understanding. So the reason we are able to posit something outside of the original concept and put our expand our knowledge beyond that is because of the transcendental unity that we are able to have all of those things exist in a single unity, and then are able to posit things because of that. I think it effectively is what he says, but I guess we'll see if we can get there with Kant's actual language. All right. We have in the preceding chapter considered the transcendental power of judgment with reference merely to the general conditions under which alone it is justified to use the pure concepts of the understanding for synthetic judgments. It now becomes our duty to present systematically the judgments which, under this critical provision, under this critical provision, the understanding can really produce a priori. Okay, judgments that the understanding can produce a priori. And again, judgments are effectively the next step after concepts. So like, you have a concept of a dog, you have a judgment, that ball of fur over there is a dog. For this purpose, our table of categories will be without doubt our natural and best guide. Okay, that's all of our, is it judgments or is it concepts? I don't really. I thought the table of categories was concepts, but anyway. But not logical concepts, like actual concepts, as we kind of, whatever. Who knows? I don't know. For it, meaning the table, is the reference of the categories to possible... Oh no, maybe it is not the table. For it is the reference of the categories to possible experience, which must constitute all a priori knowledge of the understanding. And their relation to sensibility in general... Damn it. And... excuse me. And their relation to sensibility in general... will therefore exhibit completely and systematically all the transcendental principles of the use of the understanding. I'm going to reread those two. Well, I guess it's only one sentence with a semicolon, but it's effectively two sentences. For it is the reference of the categories to possible experience which must constitute all a priori knowledge of the understanding. Right? Meaning, the categories effectively outline all possibilities of understanding that is possible. So it must contain, all the pure a priori knowledge of the understanding as well. In their relation to sensibility in general, meaning the category's relation to sensibility in general, will therefore exhibit completely and systematically all the transcendental principles of the use of the understanding. Okay. A priori principles are so called not only because they contain the grounds for other judgments, but also because they themselves are not founded on higher and more general kinds of knowledge. This characteristic, however, does not make them altogether exempt from proof. For although this proof could not be given objectively, as all knowledge of its objects rests on it, this does not prevent us from attempting to produce a proof drawn from the subjective sources of the possibility of knowledge of an object in general. Right, meaning because it's a priori, you can't really prove it objectively because it's before experience, and so it has to be, but you could logically provide a proof for it, I suppose. For such proof may indeed be necessary, because without it our proposition might be suspected of being merely a gratuitous assertion. Yeah. Secondly, I'll be honest, I was going to say it, but I don't want to sound like whatever, a know-it-all or something, but I've been having feelings related to all of this where it's like all of this feels a little bit like gratuitous assertions. Like, okay, we got the transcendental subject unity of the what the hell, and it's just like, I don't know. I'm just moving about the world, and I'm like, what are the odds that there's some transcendental unity of this whatever the hell going on here? It seems kind of gratuitous, especially that most previous section where there's the, I guess that's the section we're in right now, the schematism that intercedes all things. Anyway, sorry. Secondly, we shall treat only of those principles which refer to the categories. We shall have nothing to do with the principles of the transcendental aesthetic, according to which space and time are the conditions of the possibility of all things as appearances, nor with the restrictions of these principles, namely that they cannot be applied to things in themselves. Okay. Similarly, mathematical principles do not belong to this part of our discussion, because they are derived only from intuition, and not from the pure concept of the understanding. As they are, however, synthetic a priori judgments, their possibility will have to be discussed here. And we have to do this not in order to prove their correctness and apodictic certainty, a proof that they do not need, But in order to make the possibility of such evident a priori knowledge conceivable and to deduce it. Okay. So we don't have to show it because we care about the mathematical principles or anything. We have to show it because it demonstrates for us the possibility of synthetic a priori knowledge, presumably in a slightly different veneer in this section. Okay. We shall also have to speak of the principles of analytic judgments in contrast to that of synthetic judgments. The latter, synthetic judgments, being what we are actually dealing with here. For this very contrast frees the theory of synthetic judgments okay, I understand, sorry. For this very contrast frees the theory of synthetic judgments from all misunderstanding and places them clearly before us in their own peculiar nature. I fucking hope so. Okay. Next section. The system of the principles of the pure understanding. Section 1. Of the supreme principle of all analytic judgments. Alright, for long-time listeners, I turned the faucet on for the cat, and cat's done drinking, and it's just running now, so it's like just dripping water in the background, so I'm going to go turn that off really quickly. All right, section 1 of the supreme principles of all analytic judgments. Supreme principle. The supreme principle. Did I say principles? There's one, and it's supreme. Whatever the content of our knowledge may be, and however it may refer to its object, all our judgments, in general, must submit to that general, though only negative, condition, that they do not contradict themselves. Okay. Otherwise, these judgments in themselves, even without regard to their object, are nothing. But although there may be no contradiction in our judgment, it may nevertheless connect concepts in a manner not warranted by the object, or, without there being any ground, whether a priori or a posteriori, to justify such a judgment. A judgment may therefore be false or groundless, though it is free from all inner contradiction. Right. Yeah. Non-contradiction is different than like being true or false. A judgment can be true or false, for sure, and still be like a valid judgment, but it can't be both simultaneously, or else it would contradict itself, and therefore, I don't know. That seems like, generally distinct to me. The proposition that no thing can have a predicate which contradicts it is called the principle of contradiction. It is a general, though only negative, criterion of all truth, and hence belongs merely to logic. For it applies to knowledge merely as knowledge in general, regardless of its content, and simply declares that the contradiction entirely destroys and annihilates it. Hold on. For it applies to knowledge merely as knowledge in general, regardless of content, and simply declares that the contradiction entirely destroys and annihilates it. Okay. Nevertheless, a positive use may also be made of this principle. That is, it can be used not merely to banish falsehood and error, insofar... Sorry, the cat is licking something on my mouse. What do they call that? Like the big mouse pad that you put on the desk? I think it's a crumb or something. Okay. Nevertheless, a positive use may also be made of this principle. That is, it can be used not merely to banish falsehood and error, insofar as they arise from contradiction, but also to know truth. Okay. How? For if a judgment is analytic, whether negative or affirmative, its truth can always be sufficiently known, according to the principle of contradiction. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I understand. Meaning, like, if you know something, the definition of something, it is asserting something, like some concept is asserting something, and therefore, since you know the definition, so long as it complies with the principle of non-contradiction, presumably it's actually valid and true. If that makes sense. I don't know. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I was going to use an example, but like I don't think it's necessary. For the opposite of that which already lies and is thought as a concept in our knowledge of an object is always rightly denied, but the concept itself must necessarily be affirmed for it, for the simple reason that its opposite would contradict the object. Or does he mean something way more simple, as in like, if you're asserting one thing, we understand effectively what you're asserting. We may not know its truth or falsehood, but we know it's valid because you're not asserting it and its opposite at the same time. So therefore, it is a proper assertion, again, regardless of its truth or falsity. Okay, what's your point, Kant? It must therefore be admitted that the principle of contradiction is the universal and altogether sufficient principle of all analytic knowledge. Is it like the only one? I guess I don't. That's where I've like I was listening to the lecture and I guess I was wondering, aren't there a bunch of fundamental things? Like I can't think of any because I'm not smart enough, but it would seem like there are some other foundational principles that we could think of that kind of function the same way. I don't know. I'll keep that in the back of my mind, and if I come up with anything, mention it. But I guess that's my only response to that. Okay. But beyond this analytic knowledge, its authority and its utility as a sufficient criterion of truth must not be allowed to extend. And this is kind of the dialectic that I think that Kant is worried about. Just because we know, okay, grass is red, isn't a logical contradiction and therefore is a valid concept, doesn't mean we know that it's true. And frankly, the fact that it's a non-contradiction doesn't allow us to say whether it's true or false. And obviously, like, more complicated examples of that are actually problematic, especially in metaphysics, according to Kant, because we know grass. I guess grass can be red, probably. I don't know. You could paint it. Okay, anyway. For the fact that no knowledge can run counter to that principle without destroying itself makes it no doubt the conditio sine qua non, but never the determining ground of the truth of our knowledge. Meaning it's the condition of its existence, but it doesn't mean it's true. Now, as in our present inquiry, we are chiefly concerned with the synthetic part of our knowledge. We must no doubt take great care never to offend against that inviolable principle, but we ought never to expect from it any help with regard to the truth of this kind of knowledge. Makes sense? There is, however, a formula of this famous principle, a principle which is merely formal and devoid of all content, which contains a synthesis that has been mixed up with it in a careless and unnecessary way. This formula is, it is impossible that something should be at one time and the same time both be and not be. I think what he's going to talk about now is like adding time into the principle of non-contradiction and that not really being important. Meaning like, okay, the grass is not red and grass is red. That could be true at two different times. So the principle of non-contradiction, even though the way we've set it up would seem to make that invalid, actually could make it valid. That's the statement's valid. Here, first of all, the apodictic certainty expressed by the word impossible is a superfluous addition, because it is understood by itself from the nature of the proposition. Right? Secondly, the proposition is affected by the condition of time, and it says, as it were, a thing equals A, which is something, equals B. Cannot be at the same time not B, but it may very well be both, B and not B, in succession, right? For instance, a man who is young cannot be at the same time old, but the same man may very well be young at one time and not young, that is, old at another. That's a better example. It's fucking red grass. Idiot. The principle of contradiction, however, as a purely logical principle, must not have its application limited to relations of time. Okay, hold on. The principle of contradiction, however, as a purely logical principle, must not have its application limited to relations of time. Yeah, okay. And the before-mentioned formula runs, therefore, counter to the very intention of the principle. The misunderstanding arises from our first separating a predicate of a thing from the thing's concept, and then connecting with that predicate its opposite. This never gives us a contradiction with the subject, but only with its predicate, which was synthetically connected with the subject. And it does so only if the first and second predicate are both posited at the same time, right? If I say a man who is unlearned is not learned, I must add the condition at one and the same time, right? For a man who is unlearned at one time may very well be learned at another. But if I say no unlearned man is learned, then the proposition is analytic, for the characteristic unlearnedness now forms part of the concept of the subject. Yeah, that makes sense. Meaning, a man who is unlearned is now learned. Sorry, I feel like my saying learned is annoying. Posits like two potential temporal possibilities. But if you just say, what did he say? I lost it. No unlearned man is learned. It kind of takes time out of it, because it's saying it can't exist at the same time, and therefore it becomes analytic. Okay. No unlearned man is learned, then the proposition is analytic. For the characteristic unlearnedness now forms part of the concept of the subject, so that the negative proposition becomes directly evident from the principle of contradiction, and without the need to add the condition at the same time. This is the reason why I have so altered the wording of the principle that it displays distinctly the nature of an analytic proposition. Okay. I don't think this is a huge deal. I think most people just kind of accept this. Okay. The system of principles of the pure understanding, section 2. Of the supreme principle of all synthetic judgments. The explanation of the possibility of synthetic judgments is a task of which general logic knows nothing. Right, we can't learn about synthetic things which extend our knowledge with general logic, like the principle of non-contradiction, because it actually doesn't tell us anything additional about the world. It just tells us something about the logic underlying the existence of things or stuff like that. And the analytic part of it just tells us about the thing itself. Well, I shouldn't say the thing itself. Just tells us, a definitional truth that we can't extend our knowledge from. So, okay. The explanation of the possibility of synthetic judgments is a task of which general logic knows nothing, not even the name. But in a transcendental logic, it is the most important task of all. Indeed, even the only one, if we are considering the possibility of synthetic a priori judgments, and also the conditions and scope of their validity. For when that task is accomplished, the purpose of transcendental logic, namely to determine the scope and limits of pure understanding, will have been completely fulfilled. Gotta take my sweatshirt off, sorry. Okay. In an analytic judgment, I remain with a given concept in order to predicate something of it. Right? If what I predicate is to be affirmative, I only ascribe to that concept what is already thought in it. If it is to be negative, I exclude only its opposite. I exclude from it only its opposite. In synthetic judgments, on the contrary, I have to go beyond the given concept in order to consider, as in relation with the concept, something totally different from what was thought in it. Hence we have in this relation never a relation of either identity or of contradiction, and there is nothing in the judgment itself by which we can discover its truth or its falsity. Yes. It's weird to actually know what Kant is talking about for a paragraph. Granted, therefore, that we must go beyond a given concept in order to compare it synthetically with another. A third element is necessary, wherein alone the synthesis of the two concepts becomes possible. When he talked about this in the lecture, I was a little confused by this, but it makes perfect sense reading it. Because, okay, you have a synthetic judgment, and then you have, it effectively posits something outside of the definition of something. Grass is red is probably synthetic, isn't it? It's not analytic. Anyway, so you actually have to go figure out whether grass is actually red. You have the concept, grass. You have the idea, red. Something has to connect those two things. And if it's something that can be experienced, it's obvious that experience connects those two things. You compare the synthetic judgment with the actual, experience and figure it out. But I think Kant is, obviously with synthetic a priori things, you don't have experience, so you have to figure out what Kant is trying to figure out is what is the third thing for synthetic a priori judgments. What then is the third element that is the medium of all synthetic judgments? I don't know. It's probably pretty cool, though. There's only one sum total in which all our representations are contained, namely inner sense and its a priori form in time. Okay. There's only one sum total in which our representations are contained, namely inner sense and its a priori form, time. So, no matter what the synthetic judgment is, it is subject to time, which is our inner a priori, inner sense we talked about in the transcendental aesthetic. And without time, we can't have any synthetic propositions. Okay. It's tough to wrap my head around that. Okay. I think that's what he's going to say, at least. The synthesis of representations rests on imagination. But their synthetic unity, which is required to form a judgment, rests on the unity of apperception. Transcendental deduction, right? In these, therefore, the possibility of synthetic judgments will have to be discovered. And, as all three contain sources of a priori representation, the possibility of pure synthetic judgments will also have to be discovered in them. Indeed, They will on these three grounds be necessary if any knowledge of objects is to be obtained that rests entirely on synthesis of representations. Okay. If knowledge is to have objective reality, that is to say, if it is to refer to an object and have in that object sense and meaning, the object must be capable of being given in some way or another, or some way or other. Without that, the concepts are empty. We have thought by means of them, but we have not in thus thinking known anything. We have only played with representations. Right, meaning if I think of something, unless I actually experience it in the world, I don't know whether it actually exists. Because I can think of just about anything. Most of it. I don't know if I could think of something that I haven't had through experience. I guess I could. Like, I would think about a 10,000-sided object. I've never actually experienced that in the world. But in order to know that they exist, I guess I'd have to experience that. Besides it being just some, abstract concept in my head. Well, it's not that abstract, but whatever. I think I'm bad at examples. Maybe I'm just bad at all of this. To give an object, if this is not meant again only as only an immediate way, but if it means to present something immediately in intuition, is nothing else but to refer the representation of the object to experience, actual or possible. Even space and time, however pure these concepts may be of all that is empirical, and however certain it is that they are represented in the mind entirely a priori, would nevertheless lack all objective validity, all sense and meaning, if we could not show the necessity of their use with objects of experience. Okay? Indeed, the representation of space and time is a mere schema. What? It's a mere schema that always refers to that reproductive imagination which calls up and summons the objects of experience, without which they would be meaningless. Is it a schema and also a form? Are those two different things? Or is he kind of saying the same thing? So if it's a form, it's like the underlying a priori basis for everything to be perceived. I guess it's not there in actuality, though, would be Kant, without somebody to intuit it. But when it actually is there in actuality, this is the point of the schematism section, I think. When it actually is there, you're in time experiencing it, and you're in space experiencing it. It's no longer obviously an a priori intuition, and therefore it is a schema that is connecting matter, intuitions with you, that is eventually synthesized and funneled into the apperception of the unity of the apperception, etc. Okay. The same applies to all concepts without any distinction. It is therefore the possibility of experience. That's in bold, man. Possibility of experience, which gives objective reality to all our a priori knowledge. True, I think. Experience, however, rests on the synthetic unity of appearances, right? That is, on the synthesis according to concepts of the object of appearances in general. Transcendental deduction. Without such synthesis, experience would not be knowledge, but only a rhapsody of perceptions, which would never grow into a context according to the rules of an altogether connected, possible consciousness, nor into a transcendental and necessary unity of apperception. I agree. Experience depends, therefore, on a priori principles of form, that is, on general rules of unity in the synthesis of appearances. And the objective reality of these rules as necessary conditions can always be shown in... Hold on. Sorry, I lost the thread. Experience depends, therefore, on a priori principles of its form, that is, on the general rules of unity in the synthesis of appearances. Okay. And the objective reality of these rules as necessary conditions can always be shown in experience, nay, even in the possibility of experience. Without this relation, synthetic a priori propositions are completely impossible. Sorry, what the fuck is he talking about? For they have then no third element, that is, no object in which the synthetic unity of their concepts would establish objective reality. Okay, I gotta reread this paragraph. Okay, I wonder how many pages I'm actually reading to finish this 688-page book. It's at least double so far. Actually, if you count my previous readings, it's probably quadruple. Not the 600, but the 188 so far. Anyway, it is therefore the possibility of experience which gives objective reality to all a priori knowledge. Okay, I think I get it. Meaning, the reason we can have a priori knowledge about experience is because, there is that possibility of experience that we're positing a priori. Okay, that makes sense. Experience, however, rests on the... Okay, and then he's going to say, but experience is these things. Even before we actually experience it. Okay. Experience, however, rests on the synthetic unity of appearances. That is, on the synthesis, according to concepts, of the object of appearances in general. Okay? Transcendental deduction. There's an experience and then a synthesis, and then it's within the unity of apperception. Whatever. Without such synthesis, experience would not be knowledge, but only a rhapsody of perceptions, which would never grow into a context according to the rules of an altogether connected possible consciousness, nor into a transcendental and necessary unity of apperception. Okay, if we didn't have the synthesis, we wouldn't actually have knowledge, because, it would just be a blur, a rhapsody of perceptions, which I think is a really good way to put it. And so we need, in order to have any knowledge, it needs to be synthesized, put in context according to the rules of an altogether connected consciousness. Okay. Experience depends, therefore, on a priori principles of its form. That is, on the general rules of unity in the synthesis of appearances. Okay, this is just transcendental deduction stuff. Okay. And the objective reality of these rules as necessary conditions can always be shown in experience. Nay, right, a priori, even in the possibility of experience. And that's the a priori aspect. Okay. With this relation, synthetic a priori propositions are completely impossible. Without this relation. Good God. I was like, what the fuck? Without this relation, synthetic a priori propositions are completely impossible. Okay, it seems a little circular. Okay, meaning in order to have a priori propositions about experience, we have to have experience that adheres to a priori propositions type of thing. Okay, for they have no... without this relation, synthetic a priori propositions are completely impossible, for they have then no third element, that is, no object in which the synthetic unity of their concepts could establish objective reality. Okay, so the supreme a priori principle, we have to posit effectively the transcendental deduction in order to be able to talk about a priori synthetic transcendental propositions. Sorry, that was a lot of adjectives. But effectively, we can't posit a priori synthetic propositions about experience without the possibility of experience. And the possibility of experience is only a possibility of experience because all of the stuff from the transcendental deduction. So if we are given intuitions, and then there's a synthesis, and then we have the unity of apperception. I'm kind of using unity of apperception maybe a bit loosely, but I mean like the unity of that synthesis in one consciousness, because we know that we're going to have that experience, and that's how experience is going to go. That is the basis. God, there's a creepy crawly on the ground. It's really fast. Birdie, get that. Cat's asleep. Okay. It's gone. I'm sure it won't crawl in my mouth when I fall asleep tonight. Or was I? Yeah, so we have to have that in the unity, and then we are able to effectively posit things about that transcendental deduction experience I just talked about. And that's the basis for all a priori propositions. Again, feels a little circular, and I don't know, like, what's the point? What's the point of this? But okay. Although we know a great deal a priori in synthetic judgments concerning space in general, or concerning the figures which productive imagination traces in it, without requiring for this knowledge any experience, this, our knowledge, would be nothing but a playing with the figments of our brain, if space did not have to be regarded as a condition of the appearances which constitute the material for outer experience. Okay? Those pure synthetic judgments, therefore, refer, though only mediately, to possible experience, or rather to the possibility of experience, and then on this reference alone is founded the objective validity of their synthesis. Okay. I feel like that's a pretty good summary of what he's been talking about. So those pure synthetic judgments, therefore, refer only mediately to possible experience, or rather to the possibility of experience, and on this reference alone is founded the objective validity of their synthesis. Since experience, as empirical synthesis, is in its possibility the only kind of knowledge that imparts reality to all other synthesis, this latter synthesis, as a priori knowledge, possesses truth, agreement with its object, only because it contains nothing beyond what is necessary for synthetic unity of experience in general. The supreme principle of all synthetic judgments is therefore this. Okay, we haven't even gotten to it yet. Every object is subject to the necessary conditions of synthetic unity of the manifold of intuition in a possible experience. Transcendental deduction. Okay, we got that. Thus, thus, a priori synthetic judgments are possible if we refer to the formal conditions of a priori intuition, the synthesis of imagination, and the necessary unity of this synthesis in a transcendental apperception to a possible empirical knowledge in general. And if we then say that the conditions of the possibility of experience in general are at the same time conditions of the possibility of the objects of experience, and thus possess objective validity in a synthetic a priori judgment. Alright, I'm in Kant. I'm not even rereading that. I trust you, dog. We got this. I think that's kind of what we've been talking about. That seems to comport with what we've been reading. Okay. Okay, section 3. Systematic representation of all the synthetic principles of the understanding. Systematic representation of all the synthetic principles of the pure understanding. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, we got some tables coming up. Or a table coming up. That there should be principles at all is entirely due to the pure understanding. For not only is the faculty of rules with regard to that which happens, but it is itself the source of principles, according to which everything that can become an object to us is necessarily subject to rules. For without such rules, there would never result from appearances any knowledge of an object corresponding to them. What the fuck's he talking about? God damn it. Okay, restarting the section. That there should be principles at all is entirely due to the pure understanding. And principles, I think, are like a step above. Aren't they like a step above judgments? I don't know. What are principles? Or is that like the principle of non-contradiction? For not only is it the faculty of rules with regard to that which happens, but it is itself the source of principles, according to which everything that can become an object to us is necessarily subject to rules. For without such rules, there would never result from appearances any knowledge of an object corresponding to them. Even laws of nature, if they are considered as principles of the empirical use of the understanding, carry with them an expression of necessity, and thus lead to the supposition that they are determined from grounds which are valid a priori and prior to all experience. But all laws of nature without distinction are subject to higher principles of the understanding, such that they apply these higher principles to particular cases of appearance. Okay. I'm starting to get there. Hence, these principles alone supply the concept that contains the condition and, as it were, the exponent of a rule in general, while experience supplies the case to which the rule applies. Okay? There can hardly be any danger of our mistaking merely empirical rules for principles of the pure understanding, or vice versa. For the necessity according to concepts which distinguishes the principles of the pure understanding, and the absence of which can easily be perceived in every empirical proposition, however generally it may hold, can easily prevent their confusion. For the necessity according to concepts which distinguishes the principles of the pure understanding, and the absence which can easily be perceived in every empirical proposition, however generally it may hold, can easily prevent their confusion. Meaning principles of the pure understanding are like principles that have to be true and have to be the case, whereas any empirical proposition could be true or could be false, even if it's, something we've experienced every time. See Hume. Okay. There are, however, pure a priori principles which I should not like to ascribe to the pure understanding, because they are derived not from pure concepts, but from pure intuitions, although by means of the understanding. Example, please. But the understanding is the faculty of concepts. We find such principles in mathematics, okay, thank you, but their application to experience, and therefore their objective validity, nay, even the possibility of such synthetic a priori knowledge, The deduction of this possibility rests always on the pure understanding. Hence, my principles will not include the principles of mathematics, but they will include the principles on which the possibility and a priori objective validity of those mathematical principles are founded, and which consequently are to be looked upon as the source of those mathematical principles. They proceed from concepts. I don't know why I said proceed so weirdly. They proceed from concepts to intuition, and not from intuition to concepts. Okay. Meaning, like, I don't know. There's probably an order of operations where it's like, okay, mathematics, I have to like picture a triangle, figure out a bunch of stuff about it conceptually, and then I go, actually make a triangle and create an intuition to test whether or not my concept is correct. Whereas the opposite occurring would be like, I have an intuition of this. Let me make a concept related to that, and then see if the concept matches the intuition. Okay. When pure concepts of the understanding are applied to possible experience, the use of their synthesis is either mathematical or dynamical, for it is directed in part merely to the intuition of an appearance in general, in part to its existence. The a priori conditions of intuition are absolutely necessary with regard to a possible experience. Right? Space and time. While the conditions of the existence of the objects of a possible empirical intuition are in themselves only contingent. Okay? The principles of the mathematical use will therefore be unconditionally necessary. That is apodictic, while those of dynamical use, though likewise possessing the character of an a priori necessity, can possess such a character only under the condition of empirical thought in an experience, and so only mediately and indirectly. Okay? Consequently, they cannot contain that immediate evidence which belongs to the former, although the certainty they have universally with regard to experience remains unaffected by this. Okay? Of this we shall be better qualified to judge at the conclusion of this system of principles. Our table of categories gives us the quite natural instruction for drawing up a table of principles. Alright, we got a table of principles now. Alright, I wanted to write table of principles at the top of it. For these principles are nothing but rules for the objective use of our categories. Of the categories, sorry. Okay, these principles are nothing but rules for the objective use of the categories. All principles of the pure understanding, therefore, and here's the table. 1. Axioms of intuition. 2. Anticipations of perception. 3. Analogies of experience. And 4. Postulates of empirical thought in general. The hell are you talking about, Kant? Here we go. I have chosen these names not unadvisedly. Well, that's good. So that the differences with regard to the evidence and the application of those principles should not be overlooked. We shall soon see that both with regard to the evidence and the a priori determination of appearances according to the categories of magnitude and quality, if we attend only to the form of them, their principles differ considerably from those of the other two principles. Okay? For the former are capable of an intuitive... Magnitude and quality. Like, what are you talking about? Magnitude and quality? That doesn't say it anywhere in the chart, man. We shall see that both with regard to the evidence and the a priori determination of appearances according to the categories of magnitude and quality, if we attend to the form of them, their principles, okay, I gotta go look back and look at the category table. Come on, Kant. Or come on, publishers. Couldn't you just put, like, a table of the categories or something? Transcendental Analytic. What the hell part is it in? Pure concepts of the understand. Oh, here we go. Table of categories. So what was he saying? Magnitude and quality. There's no magnitude. There's quality. Maybe that's of quantity is what he's referring to with magnitude. We'll see. For the former are capable of an intuitive, the latter merely discursive, though both of a complete certainty. I shall therefore call the former the mathematical and the latter dynamical principles. It should be observed, however, that I do not speak here either of the principles of mathematics or of those of general physical dynamics, but only of the principles of the pure understanding in relation to inner sense, apart from all distinctions of the representations given in it. So my understanding is with referring to something as mathematical, he's not referring to it as like mathematical in a Newtonian or like physics-based sense. I think he's about to talk about this in the axioms of intuition section. But effectively, I think what he's saying is like, time and space are both infinite and therefore can be broken up into infinite units. And he's going to consider, I don't think he phrases it this way, but effectively, because I can consider a unit of time, it is therefore numerical in a way, and therefore the experience of it is kind of mathematical. So think about it like, okay, I can measure time in this way. That was 4 minutes. I don't know. I can measure space in this way. That's like 6 inches, maybe. And it's mathematical in that sense, in that it can be broken down numerically, not, again, in like a much more broad kind of physics-based Newtonian science thing. Okay, it is through these principles of the pure understanding that the principle of mathematics and dynamics become possible. And so I have named them more on account of their application than of their content. I shall now proceed to consider them in the same order in which they stand in the above table. Okay, so I think what he's saying is like the axioms of intuition, which, if it's intuition, it's like presumably related to space and time, and therefore that's one of the mathematical things for many of the reasons I just talked about. In anticipations of perception, again, I'm kind of reaching here, but like perceiving something is perceiving something presumably in space or time, and therefore it is also measurable. Analogies of experience, postulates of empirical thought in general. I mean, those feel more intuition based. I guess dynamical would be the thing. Like that's more about content than measurement, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm just trying to rationalize these so I kind of understand what the hell is going on. Okay. Axioms of intuition. 1. I think is going to be my last section because this is as far as I watched videos for. Yeah, so it's a couple more pages. We can do it. Their principle is all intuitions are extensive magnitudes. So again, extensive magnitudes is kind of what I believe. I should let's caveat that. I believe that like extensive magnitudes are effectively the unit of time idea that I was just talking about. Meaning an extensive magnitude of time means time is technically infinite, but there are, individual parts of it that we can break up and therefore kind of break it up in one sense numerically, and therefore time is an extensive magnitude, says Kant. That's my understanding. Let's see if I'm right. All appearances contain, as far as their form is concerned, an intuition in space and time, which underlies them, one and all, a priori. Transcendental aesthetic. God bless. Okay. They cannot therefore be apprehended, that is, taken up into empirical consciousness, except through the synthesis of the manifold, right? By which the representations of a determinate space or time are produced. That is, through the composition of what is homogeneous and the consciousness of the synthetic unity of this manifold, this homogeneous. Now, the consciousness of the manifold homogeneous in intuition, in general, insofar as by it the representation of an object is first rendered possible, is the concept of a magnitude quantum. Gonna read that again. Now, the consciousness of the manifold homogeneous in intuition in general, consciousness of the manifold in intuition in general, insofar as by its representation of an object is first rendered possible, is the concept of a magnitude. Okay, that's the concept of a magnitude. Just some manifold homogeneous in intuition rendered possible. Therefore, even the perception of an object as appearance is possible. The perception of an object as appearance is possible only through the same synthetic unity of the manifold of the given sensible intuition, by which the unity of the composition of the manifold homogeneous is thought in the concept of the magnitude. Okay, this is I'm not going to explain it, but this is kind of just transcendental deduction stuff. Kind of makes sense. That is, appearances are, one and all, magnitudes, and indeed extensive magnitudes, because as intuitions in space and time, they must be represented through the same synthesis by which space and time are generally determined. I call extensive magnitude that in which the representation of the whole is rendered possible, and is therefore necessarily preceded by the representation of its parts. Again, this is the parts of time being, in a way, units, and therefore numerical in a sense. That's my understanding. I should probably stop saying that, because that's all I have, but I cannot represent to myself any line, however small it may be, without drawing it in thought. That is, without producing from a given point all its parts one after another. And in this way, first of all, obtaining its intuition. Right, part by part by part, we get the line. The same applies to every, even the smallest, time. I can only think in it the successive progress from one moment to another, thus in the end producing, by all the parts of time and their addition, a definite magnitude of time. As the mere intuition of all appearances is either space or time, every appearance is, as intuition, an extensive magnitude, because it can be known only through successive synthesis of part to part in apprehension. All appearances, therefore, are already intuited as aggregates, collections of previously given parts. Okay. This is not the case with every kind of magnitude, but only with those which are represented and apprehended by us as extensive. Okay. This makes sense, I think. This successive synthesis of the productive imagination in producing figures is the basis of the mathematics of extension, geometry, with its axioms. These axioms express the conditions of sensible a priori intuition, under which alone the schema of the pure concept of outer appearance can be produced. Okay? For instance, that between 2 points, only one straight line is possible. One straight line is possible. Or that 2 straight lines cannot enclose a space, etc. These are the axioms which properly relate only to magnitudes, quanta, as such. But with regard to magnitude, quantitas, that is, with regard to the answer to the question, how large is something, there are no axioms in the proper sense of the word. How large is something? There are no axioms in the proper sense of the word, though several of such propositions are synthetic and immediately certain. Right, we can measure something. But there's no axiom that tells us how big something is. Okay. We have to experience it and figure it out in order to get that synthetic knowledge. But with an axiom, we could get a priori knowledge, I think might be the point. I don't know. The propositions that if equals be added to equals, the wholes are equal, and if equals be taken from equals, the remainders are equal, are analytic propositions, because I'm immediately conscious of the identity of the production of the one magnitude with the production of the other. Right. Axioms, however, must be synthetic a priori propositions. The self-evident propositions of Hold on. I want to talk about this briefly in my head. The a priori versus synthetic thing from the introduction just popped into my head. Like, so, and maybe counterintuitively, I think the example is like 7 plus 5 equals 12. And it's like, that sounds analytic, right? Because it's just definitional. It sounds like, okay, that's yeah, we know what that is. That's true because, But that's actually synthetic. Because there's nothing in 5, in 7, in plus, in equals that would bring us to 12. Like, we have to actually do it and synthetically get the answer to it, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of the point he's making here, with the equals taken from equals. It's not analytic. But no, that's not what he's saying. Didn't he say it was analytic? Maybe it's just because there are equals, and so the equals is like a concept as opposed to... Yeah, so why doesn't that... I don't know. Maybe it's because he's talking about equals, and therefore it's kind of true regardless of what the actual content is. It's more of a logical thing, and therefore it's more definitional than 5 plus 7, where you actually have to piece some stuff together. I don't know. Axioms, however, must be synthetic a priori propositions. The self-evident propositions of numerical... he did 7 plus 5 equals 12. He's going to talk about it. Okay, good. I'm not crazy. I might have been wrong. I probably was wrong. Axioms, however, must be synthetic a priori. I swear I remembered 5 plus 7 without looking down at the page. It's literally like 5 lines down. Nobody's listening to this. Axioms, however, must be synthetic a priori propositions. The self-evident propositions of numerical relation, on the contrary, are no doubt synthetic. But they are not general like those of geometry, and therefore cannot be called axioms, but only numerical formulas. That 7 plus 5 equals 12 is not an analytic proposition. For neither in the representation nor in that of 5... Wow, I totally nailed this. Oh man. Nor in... It feels nice because I feel so stupid most of the time when I'm reading this. Sorry to get excited by this. Nor in that of 5, nor in that of the combination of both do I think the number 12. That I am meant to think this number in the addition of the two is not the point here. For in an analytic proposition, the question is only whether I actually think the predicate in the representation of the subject, which you don't. But although this proposition is synthetic, it is only a singular proposition. If we here consider only the synthesis of the homogeneous, the units, then synthesis can take place only in one way, though afterwards the use of these numbers in general. If I say a triangle can be constructed with 3 lines, 2 of which together are greater than the third, then I have before me the mere function of the productive imagination, which can draw the lines greater or smaller, and bring them together at various angles. The number 7, on the contrary, is possible only in one way, and so likewise the number 12. Okay. Meaning, like, if you have this axiom, obviously, related to a triangle, it is a functional kind of almost like formula that allows you to produce, whatever it is it's aiming at. Whereas, like, if you just have 5 and 7, it doesn't produce 12. Like, it's not a rule that gets you to 12. The number 7, on the contrary, is possible only in one way, and so likewise the number 12, which is produced by the synthesis of the former with 5. Such propositions, therefore, must not be called axioms, for their number would be endless, but numerical formulas. Formulas. See, I said that. Alright, did I say equation? I can't remember. This transcendental principle of the mathematics of appearances adds considerably to our a priori knowledge. Why? For it alone can make pure mathematics in its full precision applicable to objects of experience. Without that principle... Okay, that makes sense. Without that principle, such applicability would by no means be so self-evident, and has actually provoked much contradiction in it. Appearances are not things in themselves. Empirical intuition is possible only through pure intuition of space and time. Hence, whatever geometry says of the latter, space and time or time, is incontestably valid also of the former. All evasions, as if objects of the senses, need not conform to the rules of construction in space, for instance, to the rules of the infinite divisibility of lines or angles, must cease. Okay, all evasions as if objects of the senses need not conform to the rules of construction in space, for instance, to the rule of the infinite divisibility of lines or angles, must cease. For one would otherwise deny objective validity to space, and with it to all mathematics, and one would no longer know why and how far mathematics can be applied to appearances. Okay. The synthesis of spaces and times as the synthesis of the essential... Hold on. I want to figure this out more. I'm just going to reread this paragraph because I didn't understand this during the lecture either. because he talked about this. Like, what? I don't understand the application to reality. So if I figure out that all whatever, what was the all angles must whatever? Oh, a single point or line contains infinite points or something. What was it? Infinite divisibility of lines and angles. If I figure that out in theory, why does it have to apply to reality? I mean, I think I know why, because, like, I don't know, because the logic would, you're using is, I don't know. This transcendental principle of mathematics of appearances adds considerably to our a priori knowledge. Okay, so we're talking about axioms here, right? The idea that we have a priori axioms which tell us about the world. For it alone can make pure mathematics in its full precision applicable to objects of experience. Without that principle, such applicability would be by no means be so self-evident, and has actually provoked much contradiction to it. Okay, meaning because it applies it's valid a priori, then it applies to experience as well. Because like that's what we're doing. We're figuring out things that are valid a priori, synthetically, and give us synthetic knowledge. But it wouldn't be like a priori unless it actually applied to experience as well. And if we couldn't figure out things a priori, and that actually applied to experience, like a priori would just not be a thing really. So there's kind of this connection between a priori and synthetic that makes it, I don't know, that just seems like the definitions of a priori and synthetic, or a priori and a posteriori maybe together. Anyway, without that principle, such applicability would by no means be so self-evident, and has actually provoked much contradiction to it. Appearances are not things in themselves. Empirical intuition is possible only through pure intuition of space and time. Hence, whatever geometry says of the latter, meaning pure intuition, yes. Because you also say space and time, Kant, right before that. So I'm not 100%. Latter, I think, refers to pure intuition. For whatever geometry says of the latter is incontestably valid also of the former. Right. Okay, because it's a priori knowledge. We know it before we even experience it, and then experience confirms it. We need experience to confirm it in order to confirm that it is knowledge, and it's true, but that doesn't mean we can't know stuff a priori that applies to the world. Okay. All evasions as if objects of the senses need not conform to the rules of construction in space, for instance to the rule of the infinite divisibility of lines or angles, must cease, for one would otherwise deny objective validity to space, and with it to all mathematics, and one would no longer know why and how far mathematics can be applied to appearances. The synthesis of spaces and times, as the synthesis of the essential form of all intuition, is that which also renders possible the apprehension of appearance, and consequently every outer experience, and therefore also all knowledge of the objects of such experience. And whatever mathematics in its pure use proves about that synthesis is valid necessarily also for this knowledge. Okay. All objections to this are only the chicanery of a misguided reason, that's me, which wrongly imagines that it can separate the objects of the senses from the formal condition of our sensibility. Okay, I think I know what it is. So, like, the formal condition of our sensibility, meaning what we are able to posit a priori and what we are able to figure out, e.g. mathematics, applies to actual empirical stuff. Otherwise, all math would be bullshit, because there's a lot of things we prove mathematically that, like, maybe we necessarily can't figure out empirically, that are axioms in like, okay, I think I'm kind of there. I don't know. It still feels kind of not that bug's back, or at least another similar bug is back. Why is it so fast? I don't care, man. Just stay away from me. All objections to this are only chicanery of a misguided reason which wrongly imagines that it can separate the objects of the senses. Where'd it go? There it is. From the formal condition of our sensibility. Okay, we can't do that, so yeah. And which represents them, though they are mere appearances, as objects in themselves. Oh, there's also that aspect of it. Meaning, all we're saying when we talk about a priori stuff is we're just looking for it to conform to appearances. We're not actually talking about things in themselves. Maybe things in themselves are different, but we can't know that. In this case, however, there could be no synthetic a priori knowledge of them at all, and nothing could be known from them synthetically through pure concepts of space. And the science which determines these concepts, namely geometry, would itself not be possible. Alright. This is good. I started to fade a little towards the end there. I'm not sure I understand the axioms of perception. What was it? Axioms of intuition. But I think we're kind of there. So we're at page 196 now. We'll go to the anticipations of perception next. Should be dope.